Welcome to Living Fully. Each episode is a chance to talk about mental health in a way that's simple, honest, and helpful. We'll share stories, tips, and tools to help you feel supported and feel your best. I'm your host, Katherine Hertig. Work is such a big part of our lives. It can give us purpose, structure, and a sense of identity, but it can also bring stress, pressure, and anxiety. If you've ever found yourself overthinking an email, worrying about deadlines after hours, or feeling like you have to be on all the time, you're not alone. In this episode, we're revisiting a conversation all about anxiety in the workplace, what can cause it, how to recognize it, and some practical ways to manage it. I'm joined by Kelsey Bradley, a social worker at Calgary Counseling Centre, and we talk about everything from performance anxiety to imposter syndrome and how to find a healthier balance at work. I'm here with Kelsey Bradley, a social worker here at Calgary Counseling Centre. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
So let's just start out by telling us, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, I am a social worker. I did my undergraduate degree in psychology. That was in Ontario, and then I came to Alberta for my master's. I did that at U of C for master's in clinical social work, specialized in trauma through that program as well. That's a passion of mine and an area of interest. And I got my master's degree. I did my internship here at Calgary Counseling Centre as well. So
excellent.
Really fell in love with more of that structured counseling setting. I've done a lot of casework in different shelter settings for men, women, and youth experiencing homelessness and struggling with addiction. So that's more of my previous work prior to structured counseling.
Yeah. Wow.
Lots of different experiences in social work for sure.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So we are talking about anxiety in the workplace, and I'm very excited about this talk because I've definitely struggled with that over the years. Just different worries around my career. So I'm excited to pick your brain, Kelsey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's start by talking about, in what you've seen with clients, some insights into maybe some common sources of anxiety when it comes to work.
Yeah, absolutely. There can be different sources within the workplace itself that really contribute to that. You can see if there's, longer hours, less flexibility in the workplace, high demands on what you need to get done, expectations from employers that can absolutely foster a little bit more of that.
Right. Mm-hmm. And how can someone kind of differentiate between just kind of regular everyday stress and signs of a more maybe serious anxiety problem?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, right? There's absolutely times that you'll experience stress in your workplace, right?
That's unavoidable.
Right. Yeah, demands that you have to meet and certain deadlines, right? That's going to be quite a normal and common experience to have some stress around that. Where you'd notice more of that difference would be when you're noticing more worried thoughts, right? There's more of this inability to disconnect from work. There's more of this focus, really kind of focusing on what needs to get done and maybe not being able to separate that and noticing that outside of work too, right? That's where it's going to come in and you're going to notice that a bit more.
Okay.
As well as if you're noticing certain physical symptoms, right? You could have nausea, twisty stomach, more of the kind of heart racing. If you're noticing more of these symptoms more consistently, you're going past more of that just work stress and that just kind of being common in the workplace at times and going more into anxiety at that point.
I find that so interesting when mental health concern really translates to physical symptoms.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is that what other kinds of things might come up when someone's experiencing anxiety? So you mentioned nausea, but are there others?
Yeah. So like nausea, heart racing, you could get kind of sweaty, right? And that would be a little bit more severe too, right? Some of those physical symptoms. You notice a lot of cognitive ones as well. So like I mentioned, a lot of thoughts and worry and apprehension about work. That would really come into that as well.
In your experience and what you've seen, what role do, workplace dynamics and culture, how does that play into contributing or alleviating anxiety?
Yeah, no, absolutely, right? That it plays a big role. A lot of anxiety, it can be manifested more when there's more of those worried thoughts kind of feeding into those, a lot of that internal experience, but there's going to be a lot of things that are contributing externally too, right? So looking at the way that the workplace is kind of set up, is there more flexibility with certain deadlines, right? Is it very structured and rigid, or is there some leniency there? Mm-hmm. Is there a lot of kind of dynamics with social settings and staff and really encouraging this environment of support as opposed to just kind of this independent independent, isolated, more setting for people, right?
Yeah.
So really that's going to play a big role too in the way that employers and colleagues connect with others and how they offer support, right? Whether that's with the work itself or even just outside of that and having a place to be able to talk.
Right. So, if someone is in a senior role or someone who's running a business, how can they kind of set up their workplace to be, somewhere that's mentally healthy for everyone and not so anxiety inducing, let's say?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think really setting up expectations of the role, right? I think a lot of the time anxiety, it can go past that stress that we've talked about, where that can be quite common with work. Mm-hmm. And it can go into more of that anxiety when maybe there's apprehension or concern or really uncertainty about what it is to be done.
Right.
So a lot of the time employers can really be kind of upfront, honest, open about what their expectations are, ways that they'll offer support around that if there are concerns, right? To kind of alleviate a little bit of that concern, right? By the employee about like, what is it that I have to do, right? Do I have to do this? Is it very rigid? Is there some flexibility? So really looking at that and offering kind of that dynamic as well, to be able to be more supportive, but then also, encouraging people to be able to reach out. I think a big part of that too with workplace anxiety is maybe not feeling like you can reach out to others and get that support from your employer and see if there's something different, right? Maybe a different structure or routine to your work week or day and see if employers can really kind of support that in looking at what can we help this individual within their, to be able to strive and thrive in their workplace.
Yeah. So in like a lot of my previous roles, like my anxiety came around with the kind of fear of making mistakes. Like I felt, that there would be like these huge repercussions. So can we talk a bit about like that and like maybe performance-based anxiety? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that and what people can do to kind of help themselves if they're in that situation?
Yeah,
sorry,
absolutely.
That was a long question.
No, that's okay. It's a good question, right? And it really is looking at, like you said, that performance-based. And am I operating in this way of feeling like I need to perform and feeling like I need to meet these certain deadlines? And I think a lot of it breaking down is looking at, is this perceived or is this what's expected from the employer?
Right.
Right. And that plays a big role in it too. Is this feeling that you need to perform? And is that coming from internally or is that an external pressure? And really breaking that apart, right? So potentially if that is external, looking at, right, with the employer, what are ways that we can help this person be able to work through that and not then be internalizing a lot of that and adding to that worry, right? And we notice that a lot with anxiety. It's going to be a lot of those worried thoughts and concern about, like you said, am I performing? Am I doing okay? What are the repercussions if not, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And if you're kind of in the thick of it and you're feeling really anxious at work, you've noticed it, recognized it, what are some things that you can do on your own to help those feelings?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mean like kind of in the moment when you're noticing it coming up at work or just in general?
I'd say both. Yeah, maybe, in the moment and maybe preventative measures like.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's different techniques and things that'll help as well as different things you can structure into your routine, right? To really be preventative and help with that.
Yeah.
So I'd say in the moment when that anxiety is coming up. So let's say that's some more thoughts, right? Really tuning into, are there certain patterns that my thoughts are going into? So are they kind of worried thoughts about deadlines? Are they those kind of worst case scenario thoughts that we see with anxiety of, oh my goodness, am I going to get fired or something like that? So really noticing the pattern and how your thoughts operate. And that takes a little bit of technique, right? To be able to tune in to see what those are.
For sure. And to have that self-awareness.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So kind of looking there, if you do notice a pattern, the great news is that then you can apply something to that, right? And noticing it as your anxiety thoughts.
Right.
And kind of separating those sometimes from your own thoughts. So they are, but they're also the way that this anxiety operates, right?
Yeah.
And looking at it kind of separate, that can help alleviate that knowing, okay, this is, a pattern that I go into, this happens sometimes, and being able to kind of ease yourself, like a reminder to yourself, right? Okay, this is my anxiety coming up, and just kind of acknowledge that and be able to know that if you get more pulled into those thoughts or the content of those thoughts, it can start to spiral from there sometimes.
And not like tying it to your identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And as well too, those, I know you were asking too about the preventative measures as well. A lot of that can be like exercising, right? Like a lot of those basics that sometimes we forget about, those are really important. The drinking water, right? And exercising, making sure that that's kind of within your weekly routine.
Yeah. Yeah, they're huge. It's like they seem insignificant, but you can, if once you build on them and make them into routine, they can make all the difference for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like we said, the basics sometimes just fixing those or working on those and making sure you're attributing to those components that are really important will help with all those other symptoms.
Now, I mean, I don't know if you would know this. I mean, you might be able to take a guess. Are there certain industries or types of roles that might make someone more anxious, like the type of work that is done?
Yeah, like different types of different organizations, right? The way they operate maybe, and that can definitely contribute to workplace anxiety, right? So looking at really what are the hours like, right? Is there staff shortages? There's going to be other factors like that really go into that as well as this kind of separation from work, this like work-life balance, right? If there's kind of longer hours, more higher demands, it really would depend on the organization, right? But a lot of the time those sorts of things can really contribute to that anxiety.
And I'm thinking like jobs that have built-in uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking like farming, for instance. So much of that is totally out of your control. Yeah. You know, when's it going to rain? When's it going to snow? That kind of thing. And, you know, a lot of other jobs where you're dealing with like really intense situations, you know, first responders, anything like that. Do the types of people going into those, would they be, because they know that that's kind of the way it is, do you think they're better prepared for the anxiety that comes with those jobs? Or
that's a great question, right? With that kind of uncertainty and uncontrollability and certain factors of the job, I think it really would be dependent on the person and how they respond to that, right? Like you said, a lot of it can be uncertain, like weather changes, there's things completely outside of your control. Right. And anxiety will really get fueled by that, right? Kind of looking at it and thinking, okay, I have no control over this. A lot of the time it can be eased when you do have more control. And in those settings, you can't always plan for that, right? So that's where it's a good question. I think it really would be dependent on the person. Yeah. That being said, that's kind of what they do with that uncertainty, right? So they may still be experiencing that, right? Naturally, that's part of the job is that uncontrollability, the factors you can't control. But then what do you do with that is really
really how
the
you
next
respond
question.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a colleague and you kind of notice maybe they're struggling with anxiety, what can you do to support a friend?
Yeah, definitely. If you're noticing that, really reaching out, right? You know, helping them know that they're not alone, especially in the workplace, right? When you're all going through that experience together.
Of course,
and really just letting them know you're there to talk and really kind of validating that for them, right? That is experienced and it's not easy to be experiencing, but then just knowing that you can talk, and whether that's about work and looking at different strategies or just being a friend in the workplace, I think that's really important to have that. Yeah. To know that you're supported and not feeling isolated in your experience.
Of course. Mm-hmm. The term imposter syndrome that gets thrown around a lot, like how do you think that has an impact on someone's ability to progress their career, to set goals, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And imposter syndrome is such an interesting thing to look at, right? A lot of the time we see this with people that are more like perfectionists, really hardworking, really set high expectations for themselves and achieving, right? And really have this kind of demand. I mean, a lot of people can experience it, but we do see that more with that, those experiences. And, you know, a lot of what comes into that with imposter syndrome is that self-doubt. Yeah. And a lot of that kind of questioning, right? That competence. I'm really questioning, you know, my abilities within this job, thinking, is someone going to call me out for, you know, what I'm doing, even though I'm here and I've worked here and I've gotten here? It's really that kind of disconnect in your mind of like starting to question those things, that competence, right? And really looking at what that can do. It can, you know, have people kind of pull away. People can work really hard to try to kind of overcome that. But then also at times they can really disengage from the work and maybe not want to set deadlines because of this big fear of failure, right? That's a huge thing that comes into imposter syndrome.
Why? And maybe this is an obvious question, but I'm interested in like digging at it a bit. Why are we so scared of failure?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of consideration with that, right? Yeah. I think a lot of the time with workplace, right, when people really are passionate about what they're doing or they've worked really hard to get to where they are, they can really want to succeed, right? And of course, want to reach their expectations, I think it would be dependent too on the person, right? If someone's more perfectionist, then that would kind of hit them harder. If they're not really maybe reaching certain goals or they struggle with certain things, then that would be kind of a harder hit for them.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good question. And it's a big question, right? Because it's really looking at, you know, why do we have this fear and where is that coming from, right? That's another, I think, part two almost of that question is this internally generated or is it based on the expectations of my organization and the demands that I have to meet? And sometimes it can be a mix of both of those.
Right. So how do you see the idea of imposter syndrome connected to anxiety?
Yeah. A lot of the time with imposter syndrome, what can come into that is that self-doubt. A lot of what is that kind of narrative that you're telling yourself about where you are in your job and your capabilities, right? When a big part of that is questioning kind of competence and thinking, oh my goodness, is someone going to call me out for, you know, almost this like kind of fraud idea of this is what it's kind of driving on. A big part of that that's going to contribute to that is what you're telling yourself, right? That self-talk.
Right.
And we see that a lot with anxiety too, right? So that's where it's really that connection is what are the things that you're telling yourself in your mind? And then maybe how is that making you pull away from certain things on the job, right? And how is that kind of anxiety getting fueled, right? Are we disconnecting and not reaching certain goals or are we setting really high expectations when not met? Then how does that impact you too, right? So there's a lot of different kind of factors in there, but a lot of it does come down to the self-talk and what you do tell yourself.
So how do we challenge those thoughts or reframe them or talk to ourselves in a more positive way?
I think, as I mentioned before too, right? A lot of it is looking at those thoughts. You're noticing them come up, right? It can be almost like, okay, you know, this kind of imposter syndrome has come up for me. I'm really starting to question what it is that, like my own competence or what I can achieve and really looking at that and then having some kindness on yourself too, right? So wanting to challenge it, but challenge it kind of gently, right? So knowing that this can happen, especially in workplaces and people can feel this way and this experience can be quite normal and kind of validating that, but then also looking at what can I tell myself? A big part of that can be just reminding yourself that as long as you're doing everything that you should be doing for your work and attributing to that, then trying to just kind of have that kindness and realize
that self-compassion.
Like, okay, I am okay, right?
Yeah. That idea. I mean, I think, I don't know if this is overused at this point, but that idea of being good enough.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And really kind of challenging that. Like, what am I setting for myself and how can I be kind on what I am achieving? Right. I think we can combat that a lot too with really looking at like building that confidence and looking at what is it that you're doing well, right? Like, let's celebrate those successes and those wins. And that's huge for that, as opposed to looking just at that fear of not reaching our goals. Right? Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for employers to kind of skip over that as well because you're so focused on results and outcomes, but like even little stuff, it's important to notice that.
Right.
To acknowledge it.
Absolutely. Right. Because those little steps and those little wins that we'd consider are really helping us towards those big outcomes that we want to reach. And I think sometimes we look at the outcome and not really look always at the steps that are being taken to get to that and celebrating that along the way.
Yeah. So you talked a bit about a work-life balance. So do you have any tips for maintaining a healthy work-life balance?
Yeah, definitely having that separate space away from work, right? Like disconnecting, whether that's doing something differently or just really kind of disconnecting from thinking about work and doing things that help keep that separation. So we're not always thinking about work and then that anxiety isn't fueled more.
And that's a little harder now with like remote work.
Yeah.
Like my office is in our spare room in the house. And so sometimes I feel like, you know, I'm spending 24/7 there. So
yeah, it's when you're having that more kind of work-life balance when work is at home. Sometimes that can be really challenging, right? But really doing those things that help separate that. So whether that's, like we said before, like exercising, getting out, visiting friends, really having this outside of work experience, right? And kind of spending time with loved ones, those sorts of things, taking care of yourself physically and, you know, sleeping well, all those sorts of things are going to really help with that work-life balance to not feel that you're always working, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? Like, how do you communicate those boundaries in a situation where, you know, if you're working for someone who isn't really respecting that balance, or the expectations you feel are too high?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think really going into it kind of open and honest about, what your hopes are for helping the organization, right? And being mindful of that, of maybe the employer's asking it for a certain reason. Maybe there's certain things that have to be attended to, but then also considering what am I capable of right now, right? And trying to communicate that in the most kind of open and honest way you can with your employer, while recognizing that, there may be a reason they want this, but then also what are you able to provide is a really important thing.
Right. Kind of coming to the table with solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And really being upfront, I think, too, about that, right from the beginning, sometimes, as opposed to once it's gotten past that boundary point, right? Setting that up in advance of like, what are times that I'm going to be, this is my off of work time. This is, I'm not responding to my emails, checking those, answering calls. Of course, depending on the nature of the work, if you're on call, let's not say just like, don't pick up your phone, but really based on that, if there is that space around from work, then having that time to disengage so that you're more engaged once you are at work.
Of course. Yeah. It's kind of tricky to talk about, the broad topic of anxiety in the workplace when all of our jobs are so different. Like I think about even, myself and my husband and my friends, like our days look so wildly different.
Yeah.
It's hard to comment on how one role would handle anxiety and not another. And
right. Yeah. And it really depends, like you've asked to, with the employer and what employers can do, really looking at the nature of the work. What are they able to shift? How much flexibility can be provided? And then also for the person looking at those factors that'll contribute to anxiety of like controllability in the workplace. Yeah. So maybe if there's certain things you can't control, what can you control internally or work on?
Right.
Or kind of process to make sure that you're attending to those things, even when it's outside of your control.
Yeah. Talking about mental health challenges, I mean, it's not easy at the best of times, but if it's impacting your work, bringing that up to your employer can feel, that can feel kind of scary. Mm-hmm. So do you have any advice on how to effectively communicate your mental health needs to you work for?
Really just, expressing your hopes for like obviously what's going on with you, but then also like we had said before, kind of recognizing what the organization needs and being mindful of that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that can sometimes help with that conversation or make it a bit more comfortable, knowing, okay, they do want this, but this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And potentially asking, like, is there a way we can shift this if possible?
Right.
Right. So potentially even just those small changes, whether that's in the workday or in the work week, or there's certain things we can adjust to be able to address that anxiety as it's coming up and not feel that it has to get to a point of not being able to do any of it. Right.
Right.
Kind of those small changes can be really helpful, and really looking at that and kind of seeing if that's doable for sure.
We've talked about going back to basics with physical health, like exercise and things like that. Mm-hmm. What other kind of self-care routines or practices are important to kind of mitigate anxiety building up?
Yeah, definitely. So like we mentioned, definitely those kind of like making sure there's exercise, but then other things too, right? Do people like reading or writing and kind of processing what's going on with work, talking to loved ones, spending time out of the house, and kind of looking at your self-care routine, right? Like what are certain things you're doing each day and throughout your week that are helping kind of separate from work?
And it sounds like just making sure you're doing things that you enjoy.
Yeah, definitely, right? And kind of having those hobbies that you like, going and doing those things. And within your house even, like, are there certain things that just help you relax, right? Is that yoga? Is that meditation? Like any sorts of things that really help people feel this kind of more grounded and ready to go back into work and feel that they've had this space away and like ability to kind of separate and do the things that they love, I think are really important, no matter what that looks like for each person.
Is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Anything that you think our listeners should know about workplace anxiety?
Yeah, I think just knowing that people definitely experience this, right? You're not alone, and this is something that can come up. But I think also looking at there's a lot that you can do to address that, right? Whether that's looking at structuring your workday differently, a different routine, making sure that you're kind of attending to those things before it gets built up. Yeah. Really doing that self-care, but then also reaching out and knowing that you're not alone. And this really, people experience this and it's very real and it can be scary, but there's also strategies and things that can be done to help with it too.
And I guess that brings up one more question is, we talked about what stress versus anxiety. When would someone know that, hey, it might be time to reach out for help. I might not be able to handle this on my own.
Right. Yeah. So definitely at times, like we said, with that stress, you'll maybe have a deadline coming up or just general work things are happening that week, right? Many meetings, I'm stressed. That definitely happens for people. Yeah. But I think looking at if you're really having this difficulty in disconnecting, right? A lot of your thoughts are consistently thinking about work or what you have to do for work or worrying about that. Not finding this ability to kind of separate the two or noticing maybe more of those physical symptoms, right? Are you sleeping okay? Are you missing certain meetings? That would be more of a time that you're noticing it's getting a little bit more difficult to experience, right? And definitely reaching out in those times.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kelsey.
Yeah,
thank you. Great chat.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counseling Centre podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was produced by Nick here, Louisa Campos, and by me, Catherine Hertig. A special thanks to Kelsey Bradley. Tune in to our next episode on April 7th. We'll be talking about the difference between worry and anxiety.
It's really the idea of intolerance of uncertainty is really at the heart of worry and anxiety.
Yeah.
I think, worry in particular. When that's there, this like uncertainty theme, and we're having a hard time tolerating it, it just floods in all kinds of stuff for us. And I think when there is uncertainty, it's just, there's this reminder that there's actually just so much in the world that's beyond our direct control.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that. Like there's so many factors involved and influences that can impact an outcome. And I think in just day-to-day life, we're often like confronted with the reality about like how our own power and influence to control things is actually limited.
To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counseling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counseling Centre and Counseling Alberta provide effective counseling to anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounseling.com and counselingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.